All right, let's continue. Let's go over our words again. Quick, quirk, quack. Squash, square, squeak. Think, theft, thorn. Through, thrash, threat. Okay, let's look at our vocabulary words. Biography, true story of someone's life. Emancipate to set free. Jealousy, that feeling you have when you want what someone else has. Conflict is an argument. Determined you are going to do it no matter what. Risk is a chance that might lead to something dangerous. And here's the new word, curiosity. Curiosity is when you just have to know. You can't wait. You want to understand the world and what's going on around you. Curiosity can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Let's find out. We're going to continue our biography of Abraham Lincoln by Augustus Stevenson. Abe learns by watching. Mr. Lincoln came into the cabin and looked around. He saw Mrs. Lincoln getting supper. He saw Sarah helping, but he didn't see Abe. "Where is Abe?" he asked. "I sent him to Mrs. Brown's with some venison," said Mrs. Lincoln. That's dear me. "When did he go?" "At noon, just after dinner. He should be home by this time." "Of course he should," said Mr. Lincoln. "He is playing in the woods." "It's a long way to the Browns and back, Thomas, and there are 2 steep hills to climb." "I know, but he should have been here an hour ago. I want him to help me with the log. I can't lift it alone, and the fire is almost out." Then Mr. Lincoln sat in front of the dying fire and waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Supper was ready, but everyone waited for Abe to come. "He is always late," said Mr. Lincoln. "He thinks of nothing but play." "He doesn't really play, Father," said Sarah. "He just stops to look at things." "What things?" asked Mr. Lincoln. "Oh, trees, clouds, grass, and stones." Mr. Lincoln frowned. "It's all nonsense," he said. "It's a bad habit." Suddenly, Mrs. Lincoln smiled. "I heard him whistle to Honey," she said. "He'll be here in a minute." Sure enough, just then, Abe and Honey came out of the dark woods. In another minute, they were in the cabin, and Abe was hanging his cap on a peg. "Mrs. Brown said she was much obliged for the venison," Abe said to his mother. That means she appreciates it. "You should have been home an hour ago," said his father. "I didn't know it was so late. I was looking at something." "You are always looking at something," said Mr. Lincoln. "I'll try not to be late again," said Abe. "What were you looking at?" asked Sarah. "That tall poplar tree on top of our hill." "You've seen it 100 times," said Mr. Lincoln. "But I never noticed how it looked at night. It leans over, you know, Father." "Well, what if it does?" "Why, it leans right across the smoke that comes from Mr. Brown's chimney." "Did you watch that for an hour?" asked Mr. Lincoln disgustedly. "I watched it for a long time. I wanted to see if the smoke was always at the back of the tree, and it was. It was pretty, too." "I must look at it some night," said sweet Nancy Lincoln. "There's no sense in looking at trees and smoke," said Mr. Lincoln. "You just waste time, and I want you to stop, Abe." "I'll come straight home next time." Now I'm going to draw a conclusion here. A conclusion is an idea that brings several facts together. We know that Abe never went far into the forest until he learned to be safe. And we know that he helped both his mother and his father with chores. We know that he took care of his sister when they fished. We know he was kind to a soldier. And now we know that Abe will hurry home instead of watching things in the forest. So I can conclude here that Abe is influenced by his parents, and he learns lessons from them, and he follows them. "Supper is ready," said Mrs. Lincoln. "No supper till we put another log on the fire," said Mr. Lincoln. "Come along, Abe, and help me bring one in." The fire. One night, a few weeks later, a neighbor rushed to the Lincoln cabin. He didn't knock. He didn't take off his cap. He didn't speak to Mrs. Lincoln or Mr. Lincoln. He didn't speak to Sarah or Abe. He didn't tell them why he carried a large water bucket. He didn't say why the bucket was empty. He just stood there in the door and shouted, "Fire! Fire! Brown's cabin is on fire!" "I'll be ready in 1 minute," said Mr. Lincoln, jumping to his feet. "So will I," said Abe. Now, the Brown family lived some distance from the Lincolns, but that didn't make any difference. Settlers always helped one another if there was trouble. So Mr. Lincoln seized a large bucket, and Mrs. Lincoln gave him his cap. Abe seized another bucket, and Sarah gave him his cap. Then out they ran, Mr. Lincoln and the neighbor, and out ran Abe after them. "I want to go too," cried Sarah. "No, Sarah," said Mother. "You must stay here with me. But I've never seen a big fire, said Sarah. Please let me go. There's a creek to cross. Could you run over the log in the dark? Sarah hung her head. Mother went on. The others will. They will climb the steep hills like rabbits and leave you far behind. I'll stay here, Mother, said Sarah. It was just as Mrs. Lincoln had said. The two men and Abe crossed the creek in the dark, and they ran across the log, too. They came to a steep hill, and up they went like rabbits. Sometimes Abe slipped and fell, but he didn't mind that. He reached the top. They could see the smoke plainly now, great clouds of it floating into the dark sky. Yes, it's the Browns' cabin, said the neighbor. There's no doubt of it. Not a bit, said Mr. Lincoln. Come on. Wait, said Abe. There isn't any use in going further. The men were astonished. They turned and looked at Abe. He was standing near a large poplar tree and pointing to it. Look at this tree, he said. Do you see any smoke back of it? That's nonsense, said Mr. Lincoln. Stop looking at the tree and come on. There's no use to go, said Abe. The Browns' cabin isn't burning. The smoke from their chimney is always just back of this poplar tree. The tree bends across it. I've seen it at night before. And here's a picture of them running over the log across the creek. That's true, said Mr. Lincoln. He told us about it some time ago. Abe pointed to the smoke. That smoke is south of this tree. It's a long way from the Browns' cabin. Then where's the fire? Asked the neighbor. Whose cabin is burning? Nobody's cabin is burning, said Abe. That fire is in some woods on Mr. Brown's farm. He must be burning logs. Oh, I remember now, said the neighbor. Mr. Brown told me he was going to burn some logs, but I forgot all about it. Then he turned to Abe. You've saved us a long, hard trip, my boy, he said. Then back down the hill went the two men and Abe. The men were silent. Abe was afraid that his father was angry. At the foot of the hill, the neighbor stopped. Abe, he said, how did you know that poplar tree leaned across the smoke from Mr. Brown's chimney? I saw it one night, and I watched it so long that I was late for supper. And I scolded him and told him to stop watching things, said Mr. Lincoln. I see now that I made a mistake. A big mistake, Thomas, said the neighbor. Let Abe watch things, and he'll make one of the smartest men who ever came out of these Kentucky hills. Mr. Lincoln didn't scold Abe for stopping to look at things. Not for a long time. So see, Abe was curious. He just had to know, and that curiosity paid off this time. All right, we'll read more tomorrow. Thanks for listening.